Welcome to the Surgical Edge podcast for surgical insights, reviews, discussions, and to stay updated. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today our mission is very specific, really tailored for surgeons and doctors in training. We're taking a really close look at the sources on open mesh repair for adult umbilical hernias, focusing on those key decisions for primary elective cases.
Absolutely. This is all about building a blueprint for safe, reproducible technique. Successful surgery here really boils down to two things.
Okay.
Respecting tissue planes, and most importantly, getting a truly tension-free repair. In adults, that almost always means using mesh.
Right. Now, before we get into the details, we have to put up our mandatory disclaimer.
Of course.
Please remember, all this content is for reference only. It's a summary of current literature. You must always, always follow your local institutional guidelines and clinical practice protocols.
Your own clinical judgment is what matters in the end.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The why. Why is elective repair the standard for symptomatic adult umbilical hernias? It's not just about looks or comfort, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, while those things matter to the patient, the real driver is risk mitigation.
Okay.
The guidelines are pretty clear. We do elective repair because of the real risk of incarceration, strangulation, and, the fact that these things just get bigger over time. If a patient is medically fit, the recommendation is almost always to repair.
That leads directly to the big debate, I suppose, suture versus mesh. Many of us were trained, just to close the small ones with suture. What does the evidence say now?
Well, the current data is pretty overwhelming. For almost any adult defect, primary suture repair is not the best option.
Really? Even the small ones?
If the defect is over, say, 1 to 2 centimeters, the recurrence rate with suture alone is just unacceptably high. Mesh reinforcement is basically mandated by most guidelines for defects that size and larger.
I've noticed a trend, though, and I'm seeing it in some of the newer trials, that even defects under 1 centimeter are getting mesh.
Yeah.
Why is that? I mean, if the recurrence rate is already pretty low, why take on the risk of a foreign body?
It's all about aiming for zero recurrence, if we can. It's a continuous refinement. A suture repair for a tiny defect in a low-risk patient might be reasonable.
Okay.
But the evidence shows that even in that very specific group, mesh gives you a marginal but still meaningful improvement. It's about reducing that lifetime risk of recurrence.
Right. That makes sense. So, thinking about prevention, the sources really emphasize preoperative optimization.
Oh, absolutely critical.
What are the key things we need to address to reduce that strain on the new repair after surgery?
You have to think about anything that increases intra-abdominal pressure. So we're talking about strict glycemic control, aggressive smoking cessation,
Right.
BMI optimization, of course. And the two that often get overlooked are treating any chronic cough or constipation before the operation. Those details can make or break a repair.
And what about, say, a patient with cirrhosis and ascites or a pregnant patient?
Those are special cases. With ascites, you have to get the fluid under control first. It completely changes the dynamic. And for pregnancy, you're almost always waiting until postpartum.
Okay, let's move into the operating theater. The setup. Usually general anesthesia, right?
Typically, yes. Though for a very small paraumbilical defect in the right patient, local or regional is definitely feasible. Patient is just supine.
And equipment is standard, but the sources are very specific about the suture for the fascia. Why that strong, slowly absorbable or non-absorbable monofilament?
That's a great question. It's because that fascial closure, if you do it, has to share the load with the mesh right away.
Oh.
If you use a suture that loses its strength too quickly, you're putting all the stress on the mesh before the body has had time to incorporate it. You need that long-term support from something like a loop PDS or polypropylene.
Let's talk incision. The classic is that curvilinear periumbilical incision, good for cosmesis. But for a trainee, what's the biggest safety tip right at the start?
Protecting that skin flap. Absolutely. When the umbilical stalk is really thin, the risk of making a hole or compromising the blood supply is very high.
So you don't just dive straight down.
You never dive straight down. The key is to carefully, meticulously develop the plane between the dermis and the sac itself. Take an extra 5 minutes. It's worth it to avoid a nasty wound complication.
Okay, so we've cleared the fascial edges, maybe 2 to 3 centimeters all around. How do we handle the hernia sac and its contents?
Controlled entry is the goal. You want to open the sac at its apex, under direct vision, and away from the fascial ring where things are often stuck.
And then you assess what's inside.
Exactly. Viable omentum, you can reduce it. If it's bulky, it's often better to just ligate and excise it.
And the scary scenario, you open the sac and you see compromised bowel.
That's where you need to be decisive. If it's just congested but looks okay, you can carefully reduce it. But if you suspect it's strangulated or non-viable,
You have a low threshold to escalate.
a very low threshold, you expand the incision, get a senior colleague in the room if you need to. You never, ever force questionable bowel back through a tight defect.
So contents are reduced. Now, the sac itself, is the standard still to just excise the redundant tissue and close the peritoneum?
For a standard onlay repair, yes, it's very common. You excise the extra sac, close that peritoneal layer with an absorbable suture. It just gives you a nice, clean barrier.
But there's an exception, right?
There is. If you're planning a preperitoneal or a sublay repair, you might actually use that opening in the peritoneum to get into the right plane, so you handle it a bit differently.
Let's focus on closing the fascia itself. If you're trying to bring the edges together and there's a lot of tension, why not just use a stronger mesh and really pull it tight?
That's the classic mistake. That's the lesson we learned from decades of failed suture repairs.
Because tension is the enemy.
Tension is the absolute enemy. It causes ischemia, the tissue dies, and sutures pull through. It guarantees failure. If you can't bring the edges together without significant tension, you don't. You let the mesh bridge the gap. That's why overlap is so important.
Speaking of mesh, standard is lightweight polypropylene, but you also see composite meshes. What's the difference in a clean case?
So for a standard open repair where the mesh is not going to touch the bowel, your lightweight polypropylene is the workhorse. It integrates beautifully.
Okay.
Composite meshes have a special coating on one side, a barrier layer. Those are reserved only for situations where the mesh has to be in direct contact with the bowel. It's a safety measure to prevent adhesions and erosion.
And you mentioned overlap. The sources say 3 centimeters minimum, often 4 to 5 for bigger defects. Why is that specific number so critical?
Because recurrences almost always happen right at the edge of the mesh. If you only have a 1 centimeter overlap, it's just a plug. The pressure will just push it right through eventually. That 3 to 5 centimeter margin spreads the force out over healthy tissue, allowing for real strong tissue ingrowth. It turns the repair from a simple patch into a true reinforcement.
Okay, so let's get into the technical deep dive. Sublay versus onlay. Let's start with the preperitoneal or sublay repair.
Right. So this is where the mesh goes deep to the fascia, but on top of the peritoneum. The big advantage you hear about is potentially lower rates of seroma and recurrence.
So why isn't it done all the time? What makes it more challenging?
The challenge is creating that space. You have to dissect out a wide pocket in that preperitoneal plane between the posterior rectus sheath and the peritoneum for your full overlap.
That sounds tricky.
It can be. Once the space is made, you close the peritoneum, close the fascia over it, and then the mesh sits underneath. The body's own internal pressure actually helps hold it in place. Fixation can be pretty minimal.
So then the alternative is the onlay repair, placed on top of the anterior fascia. Simpler, but it has that well-known issue with seromas.
Exactly. It's the Achilles heel of the onlay.
So when would you choose an onlay today, knowing that risk?
It's often a pragmatic choice. It's faster, less disruptive. If you have a patient with a high BMI, a huge subcutaneous layer, but a tiny little fascial defect,
Right.
dissecting all the way down to the preperitoneal space might be overkill or even risky. In that case, a simple, well-executed onlay is a very safe and effective option.
And if you do choose onlay, how do you deal with that seroma risk? You have to undermine the subcutaneous tissue quite a bit to place the mesh.
You do. So number one is meticulous hemostasis.
Yeah.
Absolutely vital. Then you need to fix the mesh securely to the anterior fascia with non-absorbable sutures.
And then obliterate that dead space.
Precisely. You can use quilting sutures, which tack the skin flap down to the mesh,
Yeah.
or if the dissection was really wide, you might consider putting in a closed suction drain for a day or two.
Okay, let's talk about the final steps. Closure. The focus here is on minimizing complications and, making it look good.
Absolutely. Again, meticulous hemostasis is everything. A hematoma or a seroma is the perfect breeding ground for bacteria, and a mesh infection is a catastrophe.
A disaster.
A total disaster. So you irrigate, make sure everything is dry, and if you use a drain, make sure it exits the skin away from your main incision.
And what about recreating that belly button look, the umbilical depression?
Yeah, that's key for a good cosmetic result.
Yeah.
You essentially tack the umbilical skin flap down to the fascia or the mesh underneath it with a few fine absorbable sutures. That pulls it in and recreates that natural dimple.
post-operatively, what are the key instructions for the patient to protect this repair long-term?
Well, short-term, these are often day case procedures. We want them mobilizing early, just with simple pain relief. But the big one is no heavy lifting.
For how long?
At least 4 to 6 weeks. You need to give that initial healing and tissue ingrowth time to really take hold and build strength.
And the long-term advice, the stuff that makes a difference years later.
That's where the patient has to be a partner in this. We have to counsel them on the importance of long-term weight control, stopping smoking for good, and managing things like chronic constipation. The repair is only as strong as the patient's underlying health.
Perfect. So to wrap up, let's give some final advice. What are the absolute key pitfalls that a new surgeon must avoid with this operation?
I think you can boil it down to 4 main rules. First, always define your fascial edges clearly before you even think about opening the sac. No blind diving.
Okay.
1. 2, if you even suspect you have compromised bowel, have a very low threshold to get help and expand your access. Don't be a hero.
Got it.
3 is the technical trifecta. Tension-free closure, adequate mesh overlap, that 3 to 5 centimeters, and meticulous hemostasis. And 4, progression has to be staged. Start with simple, small onlay repairs under supervision before you move on to more complex preperitoneal cases.
That's a fantastic summary. It really shows that modern open umbilical hernia repair is this careful balance of good cosmesis with really robust, tension-free, mesh-reinforced support.
It is. And, if I could leave you with one final thought, it's this. We hear a lot about robotic and laparoscopic techniques, which are great for many things. But the fact that we are still refining the open approach, like this move, to use mesh in even the smallest defects, shows just how foundational and important this technique still is. We're always getting better at reducing recurrence.
That's a great point to end on. Thank you for joining us for this surgical deep dive.
My pleasure.
And for everyone listening, if you like this content and found it helpful, please don't forget to share it with at least one of your colleagues or friends. Spread the word. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube and other social media pages for more in-depth content just like this.
Thank you for listening to the Surgical Edge podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Help us grow and deliver even more relevant surgical content by pressing the support button. Your contribution truly makes a difference. And don't forget to share with us your advice, feedback, and the topics you would like us to include.